Hello and welcome to Wrestling Academy. My name is Michael Classic. I am your headmaster, and with me, as always, is your homecoming king, Samee Junio. Samee, how are you doing today?
Hello, Michael. I am doing just fine. Thanks for asking. How was your day?
It's good. Damn. I mean, I just like, do we pull the curtain back now or do we save it for a second? Because how I'm doing ties directly into what we've been doing.
Spoiler alert, Michael is going to peel back that curtain right now, baby.
Okay, so ever since our Terry Funk episode, me and Samee have just been privately obsessed with the Sandman and the Sandman's intro, how he full-on chugs a beer. And so we've both been being like, I mean, how hard could that honestly be? And so every single day for the past 2 weeks, me and Samee have sent each other a video back and forth of us attempting the Sandman intro. Well, with like water and with like LaCroix and stuff like that.
Yep.
And dude, I gotta tell you, chugging is hard. It's really hard, actually. So my level of respect for the Sandman has increased because I'm chugging water and I feel like I'm going to die.
It's a lot, but it's not just a straight chug. It is a beer chug, number one. So that's one difference. Well, we're training, so it's water. It's a beer chug, but it's also high up. So not only are you just regularly chugging, we're also learning how to aim a can into our mouths every day.
So how I'm doing today, Samee, is I went for an advanced move where I tried to straight up pound a can of LaCroix, and I feel like I drank acid. It burned my mouth and throat so insanely bad. And and you could see it in the video that I sent, where it's like you could see at a certain point where the pain takes over, and my mind is going like, be the Sandman, do what the Sandman would do. And I just pushed through, and it hurt. It felt bad. So how do I feel? Bad. But I'm pursuing greatness. And so sometimes you
just gotta chug that LaCroix.
Yeah, audience, to be truly great, sometimes you got to push yourself. That's what we've been doing every single day for no reason.
For literally no reason. And you know what? I'm so proud of us.
Because here at Wrestling Academy, we commit to the bit. And Samee, what is Wrestling Academy? What is this podcast?
This podcast is a show that two wrestling fans started. I am a newer fan and you're a lifelong fan. And we're out here trying to spread the good word of wrestling to newer fans who are a little bit intimidated by the task of looking into wrestling, and lapsed fans who are returning to wrestling and kind of want to get a reminder of the greatness of wrestling of years past. There's no gatekeeping here. And we've been lucky enough to receive a comment that is exactly the type of gatekeeping that we try to avoid here at Wrestling Academy, and really just the opposite of the spirit of why we started Wrestling Academy. And, you know, it threw me for a loop a little bit because I am the new fan and the comment was aimed at me. And I'm not going to change a goddamn thing about how I'm absorbing wrestling and how much I'm loving wrestling. And you can eat my ass if you're really trying to knock me down. Because it's not happening, Jerd. It's not happening, Jerd.
Yeah. I 100% agree with that. And the whole spirit of Wrestling Academy is we wanted to create a fun environment where anybody of any experience level can get into wrestling. And this is 100% my personal belief that in order to be a fan of anything, you don't need to know everything. You don't need to buy or have merch or go to shows or do any of that kind of stuff. All you need to do to be a fan is just like what you like. And so for us, that's the whole ethos of the podcast is you don't need to do anything. And I sort of took it the opposite way than you did, Samee, where to me, I was like, ooh, we got our first gatekeeper. That means we're legit. We're getting into the big time here, dude.
I'm astounded at how popular and viral we are that we got this.
Oh yeah, so big time, dude. Huge numbers, doing huge numbers. I mean, again, I think I would also say I probably would be having a different reaction if somebody was like, that Dilbert motherfucker doesn't know anything about wrestling. You know what I mean? Like, I'd probably be, that probably would bristle me too. So I just wanted to say that whether you know a lot about wrestling or you know very little about wrestling, if you're new to it, you're a lifelong fan, this is the podcast for you. All we want to do is celebrate the stuff we love.
Well, what's funny about what we were just talking about, how you don't need to know every fact to be a fan of anything. But since the curtain has already been peeled back, I think you and I put the pressure on ourselves to present every single fucking detail to our listeners. And so, you know, I don't know. I just go fuck yourself and watch some wrestling. Goddamn.
Yeah, if you're
leave me alone.
Let me amend my intro. Whether you're just getting into wrestling or you're a lifelong fan of wrestling, if you like wrestling and you want to celebrate it, come celebrate it with us. But if you're a jerk, you can fully just like fuck off. How about that?
Yeah, just leave.
So
it's okay.
We're the podcast for you, unless you're a dick, in which case, fuck off. How about that?
Be our friend, unless you're a dick.
Samee, okay, look.
Yeah.
Here's the thing. I think we're getting too rattled here. Would you be amenable to, what if we just did a quick Sandman to sort of recalibrate, and then we'll jump into Christian Cage? You good? You like that? Things are getting hectic. We're just gonna pop off a quick Sandman, and then we're gonna get started with Christian Cage.
All right, I love you, buddy.
I love you too.
Dink.
I panicked and it came out of my mouth. Fuck.
Oh shit.
Well, all right.
And that, everybody, is whoa! I've never seen a cat crush from you. Wow. How was that?
Sorry. We're on camera, so I had to do it. I wussed out. I didn't do it. I didn't go full force. Dude, I'm so fucking I'm so discombobulated.
In an attempt to get us back on track, we have thrown ourselves off of the rails. Let me get into Christian Cage's bio while you try to figure it out. Yeah, welcome to me during every other episode where I'm just brought to tears. All right, I will get into Christian's bio while you try to adjust yourself. Ready? Okay, so Christian Cage is not actually his real name. His real name is William, quote-unquote, J. Resso. He's 50 years old now and actively on a tear in AEW as the leader, father, of a group called the Patriarchy Faction. Jay trained with Dory Funk Jr. and Ray Hutchinson and spent some time wrestling in Canadian Indies. That's right, this wrestler today is from Canada. If the name Christian Cage or Christian feels familiar to you, that's because he was in WWE from 1998 to 2005, where he was a member of The Brood. The Brood was a vampire heel faction led by Gangrel. Christian's in it, and Christian's real-life best friend, Edge, is in it. Christian and Edge grew up together. They met in middle school, and during The Brood,
so basically what happened was Edge and Christian became so popular within the Brood that they went on to have a very successful tag team career as just the two of them.
So Edge and Christian were a really, really great tag team. And eventually, of course, they turned against each other, and their in-ring chemistry was so good that they're just lauded to be one of the best tag teams out there.
I think something that's important to note about Christian's time in the WWE is, so they were in the Brood, Edge, Christian, Gangrel, and then Edge and Christian became so popular that they became their own tag team outside of the Brood, and then they went on to have a whole thing. But then what started to happen was Edge became the more popular superstar that people wanted to push, and so they broke Edge and Christian up. And so Edge, they had a lot of plans for, they did a lot of stuff with, but then Christian was always languishing. They just never really did a ton of stuff with him, and they didn't really have any creative ideas for him. So much so that I think by the time 2005 rolls around, I think Christian is so fed up that he asks to be released from the WWE to search for greener pastures, because I think he felt he had a lot more to offer and he wasn't getting that opportunity in the WWE. And so that is when he joins up with a young upstart wrestling promotion called TNA Wrestling.
So to further kind of break down Christian, I think from all of the research and matches that I've seen him in or watched him in, I would say that he is a career heel, much like Dolph Ziggler that we talked about a couple episodes ago.
People who know Christian currently right now, he's in AEW, they probably know him as a almost completely different kind of heel than he was in the early 2000s. So the kind of heel he was as Edge and Christian, and the kind of heel he is in Christian's coalition is very similar, I think. And so he's basically always this really smarmy, cocky, egomaniacal heel.
He's equally as dastardly as he is a really, really good wrestler. He thinks he's the best, and he moves like he thinks he's the best in ring and outside of the ring. And I feel like, I wouldn't say it's cowardice, but it might be self-preservation, where he's avoiding anything that he doesn't need to be in, but is like really, really good once he's in a situation where he has to be wrestling. You know what I mean?
I think you're right. I think that's why he's such a good heel, is he has all the tools to be great, but I think deep down he doesn't believe it. And so I think for you, it's sort of he's being strategic and he's picking the exact right conditions that benefit him. And I think deep down the character Christian doesn't think he can do it. And so he surrounds himself with a lot of stuff. But again, when you put him to the test, he can absolutely deliver. Because I think what makes a good villain is there's something fundamentally broken about them. And so I think Christian could be great, but I think deep down the character doesn't feel that he is. That's just my read. This is based off nothing but watching him for like a week straight, being like, what's going on with this guy? What's going on with this character? Why is he behaving this way?
I think Christian is a really beautiful wrestler. He's on the taller end, and he's like proportioned where his legs are longer than his torso. He's stunning, and everything is really, really smooth. And I feel like he's, a lot more agile than you'd think. So when you see taller wrestlers, you can either break them down as like powerful dudes or lanky spiders. But I think he's like kind of in the middle. Does that make sense?
He was so good on the mic and so good at being that preening sort of cocky heel. I think it really doesn't make sense for him to be as good in the ring as he is, because I think a lot of times in wrestling, someone's either really good on the mic or really good in the ring, and a lot of times one of those skills is better than the other. So it really doesn't make sense for Christian to be like as good on the mic as he is and as good in the ring as he is. And so I think it does put him in this thing where he's so good at talking that I think a lot of times, especially in the WWE, they would put him in that kind of position where it's like, oh, you're gonna be like the mouthpiece, but it's like, yeah, but he is a good wrestler too, though. So
I do love seeing when a wrestler is well-rounded in that way, where they're really, really good at all of the things that they have to be.
I think that's what makes him as a heel so good, is that he 100% can back it up in the ring. It makes it especially frustrating to watch someone be such a good villain, but also be like, but you can wrestle. Why are you cheating even though you can win?
Well, I think and this is what I've observed of Christian's time in TNA, is that he thinks he's the best, or he knows he's the best, but maybe this goes into your psychoanalysis, where he maybe thinks that he can't achieve all of the greatness without cheating. Okay, cool. Yeah. We did it. We solved it.
I think there's a little bit of self-sabotage in the character of Christian. That's the character of the wrestling character of Christian Cage. So as we said, in 2005, he found himself kind of at a crossroads. He felt like he was right at the ceiling of what WWE would allow him to be. And so he wanted more, I think, for himself in his career. So he quit and he jumped over to a brand new company called TNA Wrestling. So let's just get into the history of TNA Wrestling. It's interesting from what I found. TNA stands for Total Nonstop Action, and it was a company founded May 10th, 2002. I guess to get into where TNA comes from, we need to touch on a wrestler named Jeff Jarrett briefly. So, Samee, you might remember Jeff Jarrett from our very first episode where we covered that episode of Monday Night Raw in 1999 where there was Jeff Jarrett was there and he was kind of controlling over Miss Deborah, and that was sort of his whole thing, right? So that is Jeff Jarrett. Similar to Christian, Jeff Jarrett, he's been a wrestler since the mid-80s. He wrestled all over the place, primarily WWF and WCW, and he is what I would call a mid-carder. And Samee, pop quiz. What's a mid-carder?
A mid-carder is somebody who's not the main event, but they are in almost every episode of Raw or SmackDown, and they'll be competing for like the Intercontinental Championship or the US Championship, or you'll find them like with a tag team championship or something like that.
Yeah, absolutely. So basically, they're not exactly the A-level top talent who are challenging for the world championship, but I think they're very good, solid wrestlers, very interesting characters, something. But for whatever reason, either it's a talent issue or it's a management creative issue where for whatever reason, something about them just hasn't quite clicked with the fans. So people like them, they're very good at what they do, but they just are lacking a little je ne sais quoi to get to that next top level that makes people want to go out of their way to see them. Jeff Jarrett in the WWF was absolutely a mid-carder. He had a really fun thing that he would do that I loved personally watching as a kid, where he would hit somebody with a guitar and the guitar would smash. So it was always, oh, Jeff Jarrett's about to hit somebody with a guitar. Hell yeah. And so he was kind of right at the top of where he was going. And I think very similar to Christian Cage was like, I think I'm getting kind of to the top of what WWF is going to allow me to do. So what if I explore the wider world of wrestling? And in 1999, when Jeff Jarrett was going to make the leap, the only company in town was WCW, which was a fierce rival. So there's a thing called the Monday Night Wars, and it was basically the two companies are going head to head in the ratings to try to capture the same fan base, basically. So Jeff Jarrett is going to jump ship over to WCW, and WWF is like, you know what? Totally cool. Absolutely fine with that. One problem, Samee. Jeff Jarrett was the Intercontinental Champion at the time. Man. So what's the solution here, right? You have Jeff Jarrett lose the title, right? That makes sense. So that's precisely what they're going to do. At the pay-per-view No Mercy, October 17th, 2000, they're like, okay, we're going to have Jeff Jarrett fight Chyna. And it's going to be this big historic thing where like Chyna, who's like a women's wrestler, is going to beat a men's wrestler for a men's title, like pretty unheard of, headline grabbing, historic victory, right? Only Jeff Jarrett's contract expires October 16th, the day before No Mercy. And so the WWE is like, hey, Jeff, would you be able to do us a solid and wrestle this match even though you're not under contract? And Jeff Jarrett goes, you guys, I have absolutely no problem wrestling without a contract.
Sure.
All you need to do is pay me $200,000.
Okay.
And so they're like, look, he has the Intercontinental Championship belt. We kind of don't have a choice. And so Jeff Jarrett wrestles a match in which he loses. It's about a 10-minute match against Chyna.
Right.
And he gets $200,000 for the 10-minute match. And I've seen interviews with Jeff Jarrett where he was like, hey, a lot of people throw around the story goes that I held the WWF hostage for $200,000. But honestly, everybody was totally cool. Everybody thought it was totally fine. Nobody was pissed at me at all. And besides, Samee, even if they were pissed at him, he's going over to the WCW anyway. So who gives a shit, right?
Right.
So in 2001, WCW goes out of business.
Oh.
And even though Jeff Jarrett says there's no hard feelings, for whatever reason, the WWF doesn't want to hire him back.
Oh, shucks. I wonder why. Everybody was so cool.
According to the interview, everybody was cool. So I don't know what. Seems like nobody was mad, so I don't know what happened. Anyways, so Jeff is looking. He's like, WCW doesn't exist anymore. WWF, for whatever reason, doesn't want him back anymore. So what is he to do? He starts his own company, TNA Impact Wrestling, Total Nonstop Action, 2002. And then that becomes the TNA that we're going to be talking about for the rest of the episode.
Oh, my.
Samee.
Yeah.
We hopped in and we looked into TNA a little bit. Were there anything that just immediately jumped out to you when we watched TNA wrestling? Did anything feel different? Did anything feel the same? Like, what was your first impression of seeing TNA wrestling?
Obviously, there's a 6-sided ring.
The thing that I was noticing a lot is the storytelling absolutely felt like in the late 90s, early 2000s in WWE, there was that big soap opera-y twist and turn, and this person was your friend, but they betray you doing that. And I feel like, to me, especially the time period we were watching, that was the main thing that jumped out to me, was every story beat had like 2 or 3 reversals and betrayals built into it, to the point where I found myself several times when going through the TNA impacts being like, wait, who just betrayed it? Like, what?
Yeah.
Like, I don't get what the motivation is. And it does feel like it's absolutely the instinct to be like, oh, we always want to be one step ahead of the fans, so we're going to build a twist, a turn, and a surprise. But for whatever reason, the instincts were like, right, but I mean, all these fans are going to know, so we got to do 2 more surprises. And sometimes just doing 1 surprise is enough. Sometimes doing no surprises is fine. But I think with wrestling and wrestling fans in general, I think a lot of times we're looking for that. It's called a swerve, right? Where it's like, oh, we thought it was going this way, and then it swerves and this is happening. And so I think a lot of times that's just built into the DNA of wrestling storytelling. So as fans, we're always looking for it. And I just noticed when I was watching TNA, they were just they were foot on the gas in terms of surprises. And I don't know if it was always successful, but it certainly made everything we watched insanely dramatic.
Right. And I feel like that overcomplication didn't stop at storylines, because some of these match stipulations were out of control. There was one specifically that caught my eye that was like, it was a barbed wire cage match, but it didn't have a ceiling. And the stipulation was the winner of the match had to get over the top. You had to earn cable cutters at some point. It's like, what are you guys doing?
You had to wrestle the match and through wrestling unlock cable cutters to cut the cage and be able to escape.
Yeah, or there was one where, like, again, it was barbed wire, but you couldn't pin somebody until they were bleeding.
It seemed like there were microtransactions in the wrestling match, where it's just like, if you want to win, you gotta up the stakes. So yeah, it did feel like, and the 2 things that we mentioned, I do want to circle back to. You mentioned, we sort of buried the lead on it. The most prominent difference between TNA and WWE is TNA had a 6-sided ring, and that was very much by design. That was sort of my mission in doing this episode, was trying to figure out, what's the deal with the 6-sided ring? Like, why did they do it? What's going on here? And so here's what I found. Basically, Jeff Jarrett, when he was putting together the idea, the concept for TNA, he was very much inspired by, I guess, lucha promotions like AAA down in Mexico, would occasionally use a 6-sided ring. From what I could tell, it seemed like it was regional, so not everywhere had them. So sometimes they would go to a place and they would have a 6-sided ring, so they would do a 6-sided ring match. But what Jeff Jarrett said is it immediately set them apart. So when they were talking to like advertisers, the advertisers were very interested in the fact that there was a 6-sided ring, because it 100% set them apart from the WWE, and it made it its own thing that they could then sell toys and advertising and being like, this is completely different than this thing over here. I was curious, was it weird to watch a 6-sided ring at all, or did it not bother you at all?
I mean, we did see them in the Lucha Bros episode, but when they journeyed down to Mexico, I was really interested in how running the ropes would go. It doesn't seem like a lot of people do, because it looks a little bit more complicated than regularly going side to side.
Yeah, much like TNA, it overcomplicated running the ropes. And so when doing that research, I agreed with you. So I was trying to find information like, okay, so maybe why would a lucha promotion like AAA use a 6-sided ring? And here's what I found is that because it had more sides, the ring ropes were tighter, more taut. So it was a lot easier to spring off the ropes or to like stand and run across the top ropes. But it just made the simple mechanics of just doing a quote unquote, like regular old traditional wrestling match, hitting the ropes was a lot harder. So you're like hitting tighter ropes and it hurts your back more. And then because it's a 6-sided ring, you have to build the support system underneath it. So hitting the mat itself is going to hurt more because there's extra support under the ring, unlike on a traditional 4-sided ring, it's got that give. So the ropes were tighter and the mat was harder is what I was finding. Also, I found a quote from Kurt Angle who said basically because of the way the ring was set up, it actually made it smaller. And so there was about 2 feet less on either side. So, he was going through the inside baseball of like, normally when you're coming off the ropes, you got 2 or 3 steps before you make impact with somebody. A lot of times you got maybe 1 step when you're inside the 6-sided ring. The other main thing that they did that was a little bit different was initially, instead of a TNA title, they used the National Wrestling Alliance title. They brokered a deal to basically, we would have a version of the National Wrestling Alliance title that could be defended at TNA. And like we talked about in the Lucha Bros episode, when AEW was getting off the ground, it was just a way to get more eyes on their company initially, where it's like, oh, we have this brand new company, this brand new title that doesn't really have any lineage yet. It doesn't really have any, it's not going to get us a ton of eyes, right? We're a brand new company. So if we were to bring in a title that has some lineage, that might be a way to get more people interested initially. So very early on, they were using the NWA title as the top title in TNA wrestling. So that's TNA. That's everything we need to know. So Christian Cage debuts in TNA in 2005. So this is about 3 years after TNA debuts. So let's set the scene for when Christian makes his debut. So this would be back in 2005. So when TNA was first getting off the ground in 2002, there was a little bit of a problem. And here's what the problem was. Jeff Jarrett was one of the wrestlers in the company, but he was also a partial owner of the company. And so very early on, he basically booked himself as being one of the top stars in the company who won the title. There's an excellent video by a guy named Marky D123 on YouTube that I will link to, where he basically breaks down Jeff Jarrett's title reigns in TNA, and he calls it the Reign of Terror. Basically, Jeff Jarrett in 4 years held the title 6 times. And every single title match and defense he would have, you needed to hit him with 3 or 4 finishers. There would always be somebody interfering with the referee and cheating. And so it's like Jeff Jarrett would get hit with like 3 finishers in a row and still kick out. And he booked himself as this mega star who could not be beaten by anybody. And it got me thinking that this is not necessarily a Jeff Jarrett exclusive problem. And in most wrestling companies, you'll find that the person behind the scenes booking almost inevitably comes up with the idea, wouldn't it be great if I won the title? And then they just held the title. And so, I mean, even in AEW, right? A lot of the producers behind the scenes, it's the Young Bucks, it's Kenny Omega, it was Cody Rhodes. And all those guys, when they first started, were like, hey, we want to do things differently. We don't want to immediately book ourselves to win the title because we're the owners of the company and we just think that would be a bad look. They were absolutely referring to people like Jeff Jarrett. So by the time Christian Cage comes into TNA in 2005, I think people are kind of sick of Jeff Jarrett being the champion. Like we said, he's held the belt 6 times in the past 4 years. And so when Christian comes in, he's very much a babyface. People like him. People think that he's a great, and people are also really invigorated. And a big part of his character was that he was like, I quit the other place because I want to wrestle here. I appreciate what we're doing here. And so at Bound for Glory in 2006, Christian Cage beats Jeff Jarrett for the title. Christian Cage is holding on to the NWA title, and initially when he joins TNA, he's a good guy. But like we said, Christian Cage works best when he's a heel, so it's not long before those old heelish tendencies start to rear their head. And what we're going to be talking about for the whole rest of the episode is a storyline involving a faction that Christian creates called Christian's Coalition. And I think this story is largely a big rivalry between Christian Cage and Kurt Angle. So before we get into the bulk of the story, let's meet Christian's main antagonist. Samee, who's Kurt Angle?
Kurt Angle debuted in TNA at TNA October 19th, 2006. His middle name is Steven, which apparently I felt was really important to put on the research. He started mat wrestling at 6 or 7 years old, and mat wrestling is basically the like Olympian Greco style wrestling. And he was actually a 4 real legitimate gold medal Olympian before he shifted over to professional wrestling. He, like Christian Cage, trained with Dory Funk Jr. and Tom Pritchard, and he started out at WWE before going over to TNA. So Kurt signed with WWE in 1998, but as Michael mentioned in our Terry Funk episode, Kurt paid a visit to ECW in 1996 and was guest commentating, but he fled the building while Raven was crucifying our boy, the Sandman. And not only did he run away, he threatened to sue Paul Heyman, aka Paulie Dangerously, if they aired him during the episode. How are we feeling about Kurt Angle right now?
So here's what I want to say about Kurt Angle. His character is that he is very much a total dork. But what I will say is I think Kurt Angle, the performer, is very good at being in on how he being perceived. So he is actually very funny and uses his dorkiness to put himself in situations where he's the butt of the joke. So he's he's good in that way. And the thing that he says that's kind of his big catchphrase is those Olympic gold medals he won those with a broken freaking neck. And that's true. He really did.
Yeah.
He really did earn Olympic gold medals with a broken neck. So my man, is he a dork? Yeah. Is he a wrestling machine? Absolutely. Did he sustain some injuries that might have led to some self-medicating that might have got him in trouble? Absolutely. Just like all I'm saying is he's a complicated guy, and all I can say for sure, and I cannot stress this enough, Kurt Angle is so good at wrestling.
He's incredible at wrestling. What I do love about Kurt Angle is that he wears the like Olympian style singlet, and when it's time to get serious when he takes the straps down and goes into what I call sport mode.
Yeah.
Where it's nipples out. It's time to wrestle.
Yeah, let's just say if you can ever see Kurt Angle's nipples, you're in danger, dude. It's over for you if you can see those.
You're about to get it if you see Kurt's nips. Oh my goodness.
Yeah, normally he's just a geek, but if you see his nipples, you're dead.
I really wish I had that type of warning. Sigh.
Yeah. The only thing I can say is like, look, if you see my nipples, you're about to probably be in a 2-year relationship.
So Kurt Angle, he's this real life Olympian, and you can really see that in his style of wrestling. Obviously, why wouldn't we? So some of his signature moves, the angle slam, the angle lock, which is an ankle lock, and he suplexes a bunch, and he really is just bodying people into the mat.
For the purposes of our story, it's important to note that Kurt Angle debuts in October 2006. Another thing that happens is a month later in November, another wrestler named Tyson Tomko also debuts in TNA as Christian's enforcer. So what's interesting about Tyson Tomko is he did this exact same character in the WWE. And so in the WWE, he was literally an enforcer for hire who Christian hired to be his bodyguard. Tomko went over to New Japan for a little bit, and then he came over to TNA, where he basically just picked up the exact same character and kind of character storyline that he did from another company. I don't know if it was cool or not, but they just did it. And I did a little bit of research into Tyson Tomko, and what I found was that before getting into wrestling, he was a bodyguard for Limp Bizkit. And according to the Wikipedia article on Tyson Tomko, if you watch the My Generation music video by Limp Bizkit, Tyson Tomko appears in the video. And Samee, I gotta say, in doing my due diligence for the podcast, I watched the My Generation music video 2 times. Guess how many times I saw Tyson Tomko in the video?
0
times. I watched it twice. Where the hell, Wikipedia, where the hell was Tyson Tomko? And I watched it twice. And I also got to say, so there's a part in I don't know how familiar you are with the song My Generation by Limp Bizkit, but there's a part at the very beginning where Fred Durst goes, John Otto, take him to the Matthews Bridge. And I was like, who is John Otto and what the fuck is the Matthews Bridge? So here's what I found out. John Otto is the drummer for Limp Bizkit.
Oh, okay.
And the Matthews Bridge is so I guess what I found out is Fred Durst and John Otto are both from Jacksonville, Florida, and that's where the Matthews Bridge is. So
oh my God.
I think what he's trying to say at the top of My Generation is, hey, John Otto, let's kick it Jacksonville style on this track.
Wow. That is gorgeous.
Yeah, so look, that's how deep into the My Generation music video that I got. And I still saw Tomko 0 times. Here's what we know. Tomko, bodyguard for Limp Bizkit, goes on to be a wrestler for the WWE, where he becomes the enforcer for Christian Cage. Christian Cage quits, goes over to TNA. Tomko goes to New Japan. And then by the time 2006 rolls around, Tomko joins TNA, where he becomes Christian's enforcer again.
I will say this. Now knowing that Tomko worked for Limp Bizkit, it really kind of somehow explains the fact that Tomko has a giant Tomko tattoo in the middle of his back. So while I was watching that, I was like, there's no way that this tattoo is real. But now knowing that he security guarded Limp Bizkit, there's no way it's not a real Tomko tattoo on the back of Tyson Tomko.
Yeah, and it's on the back, it's that pointy tribal-ish tattoo, and then so it's like this intricate design all over his arms and back, and then just in the middle, Tomko. That's what it says.
If I were to describe Tomko, I think I would definitely say that he is the human embodiment of tribal tattoo. Am I wrong?
What I honestly thought you were going to say is, if you were to really try to boil down the character of Tomko, he is like the human embodiment of the kind of guy who would be a Limp Bizkit bodyguard. You know what I mean? Like, he really definitely, that is the vibe.
All of that makes sense.
As soon as I read that, it all kind of just like, it all clicked into place. I know exactly who this guy is and what he's all about. Tomko, he joins TNA, and he basically is just right there to be Christian's enforcer. And Christian is just about to head into a big pay-per-view event at Against All Odds against Kurt Angle, who we've been talking about, who also just jumped over from the WWE. So that was another sort of bit of reputation TNA had, was at the time, a lot of guys were, a lot of the stars that were coming over to TNA were from WWE. and it got a bad reputation. But I think a lot of people really credit that a lot of those people had the confidence to jump over to TNA because they saw somebody like Christian come over and then start to succeed. So he really helped legitimize TNA to the point where a lot of WWE guys were starting to find different second parts of their career that they could grow and expand and do. And one of those people, honestly, is Kurt Angle. So I think on the one hand, a lot of people who were TNA to start with were like, well, I want to see something different. And this is all just WWE guys. And then I think people were like, well, I like all these guys and I'm glad they have a career. Sort of a little bit of a conundrum that's going on in AEW right now, but we're not even going to touch that because we're talking about TNA against all odds. So Christian, like we said, smarmy, cocky heel is just talking about how he thinks Kurt Angle is like the biggest asshole he's ever met in his entire life. He's talking so much crap about Kurt Angle that Kurt Angle comes out and is basically just like, hey, you gonna say it to my face? And then Kurt Angle is so mad that he spits in Christian's face. I don't know about you, but for me, whenever I see somebody spit in another person's face, it viscerally, Christian was a heel, but as soon as Kurt Angle spit in his face, I was like, whatever Christian wants to do to retaliate, I'm fine with. To me, it is the most disrespectful thing I have ever seen in my life. How do you feel about people spitting in each other's face?
I would rather take a slap in the face than a spit in the face. I use spitting in the face, like when I'm upset with somebody, I use spitting in the face as like a litmus test. It's like, if I want to spit in this person's face, I am very, very upset and I need to like put physical and like actual space between me and this person. So I really don't love it. I will say that Kurt kind of like sprays Christian rather than, which is, I guess, what an acting spit is supposed to be, because you don't really want to like hawk a loogie in your coworker's face. But I think I wanted more than a spray from Kurt in that moment.
So you're saying you wanted Kurt to go further.
Look, if you're spitting, just go for it, man. Yeah.
Commit to the spit.
Yeah. I'm sick. I feel sick.
So Christian, at that point, I think gets mad and he's like, you know what, Kurt, I hired a special consultant who's going to help me beat you. And they know you very well. And they're going to teach me everything I know on how to beat you. And then Kurt's like, well, who is it? And he's like, dude, you just spit in my face. I'm not going to tell you who it is. And so later that episode, Kurt Angle is fighting AJ Styles. And then Christian and his enforcer Tomko come out to interfere in the match. And then at first, AJ Styles is like, whoa, I don't know how I feel about this. But then AJ Styles jumps into the fray and starts beating up Kurt Angle too, meaning AJ Styles has officially joined Christian's coalition. For about a month or so leading up to the big match, they tease Kurt Angle every week where Christian's like, this consultant I've hired is going to ruin your life. And it becomes this big mystery of who's this outside consultant that Christian hired. So it all culminates February 8th at an Impact taping where during a tag team match between Kurt Angle and Samoa Joe and then Christian Cage with Tomko, a man rolls into the ring and attacks Kurt Angle with like a pipe.
Oh my God.
And then commentary is really driving home like, this has to be who the consultant is. And then he pulls off his mask to reveal that it's Scott Steiner. And I watched this and the crowd boos so much because what I was able to find just through my research, I'm like, why is everybody booing that it's Scott Steiner so bad? Basically, here's what I found is I think at the time people thought that it was going to be Rob Van Dam. And so, Samee, I just want to do a quick vibe check. I've got two pictures that I'm going to show you. One is of Rob Van Dam and one is of Scott Steiner. And I just want you to go off vibe.
Looking at these photos, we have
break it
Rob
down.
Van Dam thumb pointing himself in, unfortunately, it's like a Asian inspired singlet, right? We've got a dragon and we've got a yin yang. Scott Steiner, wow, what a beautiful photo. He's like in this like harsh studio light and he's flexing so hard. His biceps are massive, and he's wearing the Knights mesh chain link or whatever. He's wearing sunglasses, and it looks like he's about to kiss his muscles, which, you know what? I look like I'm about to kiss his muscles. And then he also has...
if I had biceps like that, I would be in a relationship with my muscles, I think.
100%. I think we all can admit to that. Scott also has some facial hair. It's a blonde. It's a mustache beard. I don't know what the official name is for that.
Goatee.
But then he's got a little strip of black just from bottom of lip to bottom of chin. Which of these men appeals to me more?
Yeah.
I mean, just rewinding in my head and how shortly I talked about Rob Van Dam versus how long I spent on Scott Steiner. I think it's Scott Steiner.
Huge. This is huge, Samee.
What did I just do?
No, I'm just saying, like, at a later date when we cover Rob Van Dam, I think you're going to be singing a 100% different tune. But I think visually,
really? Okay.
Scott Steiner. Oh yeah, Rob Van Dam. Fucking
Does he
rules,
rule?
Dude. He
okay,
rules.
Cool.
And so Rob Van Dam's whole thing is he's an ECW original guy. He's a very acrobatic flip kind of wrestler, and he was very, very, very cool. And then Scott Steiner, I admittedly, I don't know a ton about Scott Steiner. What I do know is he's kind of a lunatic. He's kind of a real loose cannon who used to really say some pretty...
Oh no.
Well, on mic. So he would shoot. That's what it's called. He would say real stuff on mic and would just he's a real loose cannon, and that's kind of the nicest I could be about Scott Steiner.
Dang it. Okay.
Visually looks great.
Mm-hmm.
Personality wise, the guy's a loose cannon, and that's the nicest I could be about Scott Steiner. So Samee's favorite wrestler, Scott Steiner, rolls into the ring with a lead pipe, Clue style, and then just starts beating the crap out of Kurt Angle. So then it's revealed that he is the consultant that Christian Cage has brought in. And so at Against All Odds, February 11th, Christian defeats Kurt Angle, but I will say he gets a ton of outside help from Steiner and from Tomko. And at the end of the day, Kurt Angle just can't overcome the odds. So then at the next episode of Impact, February 15th, 2007, Scott Steiner kind of reveals what his motivations were for aligning. He doesn't officially join Christian's coalition. He sort of comes in as a consultant. And basically what he's saying is that when Scott Steiner was negotiating his contract, they brought in Kurt Angle. And because Kurt Angle is so popular, it drove Scott Steiner's price down, basically. By the time March 15th rolls around, they announce that they're going to do a lethal lockdown match where it will be 2 teams of 5. So 10 men are going to be inside of a cage. It will be Team Christian versus Team Angle. So while Kurt is putting his team together, Christian is actually really having trouble getting his team together. And so first he recruits AJ Styles. And the way he gets AJ Styles on side is he's basically like, look, I'm the champion. If you help me, I'll give you a shot at the title. And then next, he goes to his old rival, Abyss. But there's a problem. Abyss was kind of, at the time, everybody was... From what I could tell, Abyss was kind of one of those monster-like characters, kind of like Kane.
Yeah.
So he's almost treated sort of like a Frankenstein's monster. So it was a lot of people trying to get into Abyss's head and steer him every which way. And so Christian is trying to recruit Abyss, but Abyss is sort of like, look, you've used me so many times in the past. Like, I don't know if I can trust you. And so Kurt Angle's like, hey, don't trust him, trust me. And so the general manager, Jim Cornette, basically lays down that, like, why don't we do a tag team match? And whoever wins gets to have Abyss be on their team. So backstage, AJ is a little bit nervous because he's thinking right now, Team Angle feels a lot more like a team than Christian's team. And so Christian is so mad. He threatens to revoke the title shot. And he's like, stop questioning it. I've got a plan. And so Samee, I just want to give you a pop quiz here on what you think Christian, it's going to be a multiple choice test on what you think Christian's plan will be. Christian says he has a plan. Do we think that Christian's plan is A, he's going to flee the arena, never to be seen again? Do we think that Christian's plan is B, he's going to wrestle the match old school and win? Or do you think Christian's plan is option C, he's going to have Scott Steiner run in with a pipe, Tanya Harding style, and beat everybody up?
Oh boy. You know, you've posed 3 incredible options, and I'm gonna go with C because I don't want to be wrong.
Yeah, the answer is C. Christian Cage has Sammy's favorite
Hey.
wrestler, Scott Steiner, running with a pipe and just start beating everybody up. They're able to win, meaning that they have recruited both Abyss and Scott Steiner to be on Christian's team. And then backstage, when Scott Steiner agrees to join the team, he's like, hey, look, as long as you give me the title shot you promised, we're all good. Meaning that Christian has now promised a title match to AJ Styles and to Scott Steiner. And so he's like, oh, and then because they won the match, they got Abyss on sides. And so now he's like, I just get my enforcer Tomko and we're going to be good. Except Tomko's mad because he's like, I heard you've been giving title shots to everybody. You originally offered me a title shot and it's been months and you haven't given me a title shot yet. And I'm starting to think that you're never going to. And then Christian is like furious with all these people like questioning him. And then that's when Kurt Angle comes out to basically try to seduce Tomko over to his side to be like, hey, look, man, I don't think Christian's ever going to give you a title shot. And so all I can say is if you join my team, you're going to get to kick his ass. What do you say about that? And so there's like a big, will there, won't they? Christian is like screaming at Tomko, saying he's so ungrateful for like, basically Christian's like, I made you and this is how you repay me. So then the general manager, Jim Cornette, comes out and he's basically like, look, guys, I'm hearing a lot of talking. I'm not hearing a lot of wrestling. So what if we have a match tonight? The winner gets Tomko on their team. And so Kurt Angle wins the match, hands the contract over to Tomko, and then Tomko attacks Kurt Angle because he's actually Team Christian deep down. And then this is kind of what I was talking about with the overcomplicatedness of TNA that I was noticing, was basically we didn't need the 3 reversals on top of it, right? Like Tomko could have just been like, hey, I'm really mad, and then we could have had Christian get him on sides. But instead we had to like draw it out to be like, you think this is going to happen, and then this happens. And you know what I mean? It's like,
yeah.
We just made a big circle to get back to the same beat. I didn't think it was super necessary. So we get to the lockdown event, April 15, 2007, and it's going to be Team Angle, which is Kurt Angle, Samoa Joe, Rhino, Sting, and good old Jeff Jarrett. And then they're going to be fighting Team Cage, which is Christian Cage, AJ Styles, Scott Steiner, Abyss, and Tomko. At this point, I would say the general manager is totally biased against Christian. And so during this match, he's basically like, hey, here's the stipulation. Whoever gets the pinfall inside of this 10-man steel cage match gets to be the number 1 contender against Christian Cage for his title. Meaning that's now on the line. So Christian is like, wait, what the hell? And so everybody in this cage, except for Christian, wants to win this match because he's basically promised a title shot to every single person on his team. And then everybody who's against him hates Christian and wants his title anyways. So Christian is like absolutely livid about this. So during the match, I would say at this point in Jeff Jarrett's career, I think he absorbed a lot of the criticism about the Reign of Terror stuff. And so he's really trying to wrestle in a way where he's like, whoa, I don't want to take anybody's spotlight away. So it gets to the point where he hits Abyss with a guitar filled with thumbtacks. And then Abyss is just laying on the ground. And then Jeff Jarrett looks at Sting and goes, hey, why don't you take the pinfall, dude? And then you can see Sting being like, what the fuck? And so he very begrudgingly takes the pinfall. And then Jeff Jarrett's doing a lot of like, hey, this is the guy right here. We love Sting. And he just, where was Jeff, this energy like 4 years ago, you douchebag?
We see right through Jeff, dog. Come on.
Yeah. The next night, Team Cage is pissed off at Abyss for losing the match. So they pretty viciously jump him out of the group, prison style, basically. And they're like hitting him with barbed wire baseball bats. They load up a chair. And then Christian does something that he made very famous in the WWE. It's called a concerto. And I was curious, Samee, do you have any experience with a concerto? Have you ever seen it?
I felt like I knew the concerto until reading these notes, because I thought the concerto was exclusively a 2-person chair move where somebody's head is smashed between 2 chairs held by 2 wrestlers. But Christian's concerto here is just slamming a person's head with a chair. one chair.
So
Go.
you're absolutely right. The way the concerto first debuted was Edge and Christian would both grab a chair and then they would just slam the chairs on either side of the person's head and they would fall down. But once they started being singles wrestlers, they debuted a new concerto that one person could do, where basically you tuck in the person's head under the chair, and so they're using the chair as a pillow, and then while they're passed out, you hit the chair with your chair, and then you give them a one-person concerto.
Jeez Louise.
How do you feel about the concerto?
I mean, it's brutal. It's brutal. I was watching something recently. I think it was GQ video with Seth Rollins and Becky Lynch, and they're talking about what's in our bag. And for some reason, they had a chair with them, and they just talked about how painful the chair is. And I think up until that point, I was kind of taking a chair hit for granted because we see it so often that I thought it was like a totally chill, like they have figured out how to make a chair hit easy and good. But from how they were talking about it, and maybe they're just keeping the magic alive, but it seems like a chair hit's gonna chair hit, which means a chair hit's gonna hurt no matter what. You ding dong, and I couldn't believe that I thought that a chair hit was basically painless.
From what I understand about chair hits in wrestling is they just hit you on a meaty part of your back. So you're still getting hit just in a place that's ideally reinforced. And they do that now instead of just fully hitting you in the head with a chair like they used to in the 90s. So we've moved away from unprotected chair hits to the head, and now they try to do it in a safer way. But the safe way is just, instead of just hitting you in the head, we're going to hit you in the back. Sound good?
Pretty good. Ugh.
So they kick Abyss out of Christian's coalition, right? And things are looking pretty grim for Christian's coalition at this point because Tomko seems ready to just like get out of the door. And then at this point, AJ Styles, who's normally a pretty upbeat and plucky to be in the coalition, is starting to have his doubts because he's like, well, you offered me this title shot and I'm kind of starting to think that you're never going to give it to me. And then Christian is like, whoa, hey, AJ, I promise you, I will give you a shot at my title. All you have to do is win a number one contenders match against Kurt Angle and Sting. So as we remember, Sting is the man who won the Lethal Lockdown match. So he's already the number one contender. So then Kurt Angle is going to challenge him to get that number one contendership. And then Christian is like, hey, look, I will absolutely give you a shot at my title if you win the number one contendership. So you're actually in this match too. So AJ Styles is like, no problem. I got this. So I'm going to give you another pop quiz on what do you think happens next. Do you think that A, AJ Styles totally got this and he wins the match and becomes number one contender? Or do you think option B, AJ Styles does not indeed have this and actually he makes matters worse by getting put into an ankle lock by both Kurt Angle and Sting, and he taps out, meaning both of the guys move on to their number one contenders match against Christian?
Oh, man. This is going to surprise you because I've historically kind of roasted AJ throughout my entire interaction with AJ. Watching him in TNA is a completely different story. I kind of love him. They painted him out to be a bumbling little idiot, but he's still a high flyer. He's got better hair in TNA than he does now, etc., etc. So, with that said, I want to say A, but I know it's B.
Samee, unfortunately, you are correct. In this number one contenders match, both Sting and Kurt Angle put AJ into an ankle lock, and he taps out to both of them. And Jim Cornette's like, well, the only solution here is to make the match at Sacrifice a triple threat for the TNA World Heavyweight Championship. So at Sacrifice, Kurt Angle defeats Sting and Christian Cage, and honestly, one of the most bizarre endings to a match I've ever seen. So pretty much what happens is Sting takes out Christian, he goes for the pin, and then while he's going for the pin, Kurt Angle sneaks in and gets Sting in an ankle lock. So Sting is in an ankle lock, pinning Christian while the referee is counting, and then right before he gets to 3, Sting taps out. He can't take it, meaning Kurt Angle wins the title. Christian Cage has lost the title. And this gets into a stat that I thought was honestly pretty interesting. So when I was doing my research for this, I found that during this time period, Christian Cage actually was on a very unconventional 2-year-long winning streak, meaning for 2 years, he never technically lost a match. And so I think what you can tell just from the story we've been telling is that Christian loses all the time, but he was always in team events, triple threats, all kinds of stuff to where his character would lose, but he never technically got pinned or submitted. For 2 years, this has been going on.
I think that's a sign of a really good heel. Like, you're just doing dastardly stuff to avoid that L.
I just thought that was really interesting. And I think he really starts playing it up where he's like, haven't lost in 2 years. And everyone's kind of like, all right, well, that's not true. You're not on an undefeated streak. So for the rest of the summer, Christian, it has to do a lot of work because now that he doesn't have the title, he's lost all his leverage. So he has to spend the rest of the summer trying to get the coalition in line. And so he really is trying to use any manipulative leverage on top of Styles and Tomko that he has, lies to them. He screams at them. He scolds them all summer. And then July 26th, he even brings in a new member, Robert Roode, to the coalition to try to spice things up. And I guess, Samee, here's where I wanted to have maybe this conversation. So Christian Cage, his character is very mean to both AJ and Tomko when they're members of Christian's coalition. And I guess what I was curious is, if you were in Christian's coalition, do you think you would fall under his spell? I guess that's what I was trying to figure out, right? Is I don't fully understand psychologically why Tomko and AJ continue to stick by him, especially in the summertime when he can't offer them anything anymore. What do you think? What do you think's going on there?
Well, I think Tomko's his bodyguard, right? So he's, from what we can understand, Tomko's getting paid. AJ, on the other hand, I don't know. I think they really painted his character as somebody, he's been floating around and Christian has given him something to tether to with the coalition. So no matter if Christian is screaming at him or putting him down or anything like that, AJ is still in his place where he feels like he belongs. So even though he's being abused, he's part of something.
Yeah, and it does, honestly, to get into the the kayfabe psychoanalysis some more, it does really feel like AJ Styles' character really regresses to the point where it almost feels like he's a younger brother, like a young child almost. So it does feel like on some level, Christian is exuding some kind of parental authority over both Tomko and AJ, right? So AJ, he takes it and he regresses into this people pleaser, wants to fall in line kind of person, whereas Tomko is sort of an older sibling where he feels a little bit protective over AJ, but he also feels the need to challenge Christian constantly while still ultimately falling in line with Christian's psychological manipulation. And I guess I also was just curious, who do you think you would be? Do you think you would be the AJ or the Tomko in that situation?
I would say I would probably be a Tomko. But if you were to ask me this 3 years ago, I would be AJ.
I think here's the thing. I think we all want to think we would be the Tomko, but I think deep down, maybe a lot of us are a lot more like AJ than we're willing to admit. And maybe that's why we don't like them as wrestlers as much. Even.
I did not know anything about this side of AJ at all, so your psychoanalysis, not underneath your breath, is incorrect this time, Michael.
I'm going to psychoanalyze you, dude. I got you. So, but what I will say is all of Christian's right? He doesn't have the physical leverage of the title anymore. So he's really been leaning on psychological manipulation of AJ and Tomko and Robert Roode to keep them all in line. And so over the summer, they also set their sights on Samoa Joe. And then it becomes a big match between the two of them at Bound for Glory, where basically Christian Cage, Samoa Joe, there's going to be a definitive, decisive winner, right? They're both because I think Samoa Joe also had an undefeated streak around that same time too. And so it was basically undefeated streak versus undefeated streak. And they brought in a special guest enforcer, is a guy named Matt Morgan. I don't know anything about him except my guy loves baby oil. My guy loves jeans. And he put both of those on display. at Bound for Glory, he came out in jeans and baby oiled to hell up top.
Yeah, crazy. Like, oh, I'm going to work. Might as well pop my shirt off and oil up.
Yeah, but still wear jeans. And that's where I was so distracted the whole match of just being like, jeans and baby oil. That's too many things. It's just it clashed for me a little bit.
He did look good though, right? I think that's what.
Oh, for sure. I mean, he was right to oil the physique. He knew what he was doing.
Even the jeans.
he knew he was right. He knew he was right.
Yeah.
So Matt Morgan, the Mr. Oil and Jeans, he's there to make sure that Christian's coalition doesn't interfere. And they definitely try to. And at the end of the day, Samoa Joe ends up picking up the victory. And honestly, a pretty incredible match. Like, I thought it was pretty fun.
I loved it. This was the first longer match of Samoa Joe's that I watched. And I think he's so impressive. I think all of the main wrestlers that we're covering today, AJ, Christian, Kurt, Samoa Joe, Tomko, are just beautiful wrestlers. I was really impressed with watching them. Samoa Joe's a bigger guy, I think. And so you'd assume that he's just a power dude. But he's also incredibly agile, and he puts all that stuff on display. He's doing a lot of really fancy looking kicks and holds and stuff. Just love it. I love it. I think I'm walking away from this episode really loving Samoa Joe and Christian Cage.
Samoa Joe is great. And I honestly think that had he started in WWE, he would have wrestled a completely different style. And so since he was able to exist outside of that WWE bubble, he was able to establish his brand. So now he can just wrestle how he wrestles. I think WWE was more concerned with putting people into boxes, right? That's why Christian eventually, that's why he initially jumped over to TNA in the first place. So he was able to find himself. And then Samoa Joe, more of a TNA original, I would say, he kind of started there from the beginning, was able to hone his style and figure out a style all his own, which I think was really cool. So during this match, Christian loses, but elsewhere on the card, AJ Styles and Tomko defeat a team that's got Ron Killings and Consequences Creed, who you may know in WWE as R-Truth and Xavier Woods, but they defeat AJ and Tomko, defeat them and become the tag team champions. So now they have gold and Christian doesn't. And I think that's where things start to get very, very shaky for Christian's coalition.
So the next big event is called Genesis, and Christian finds himself in a ladder match with a wrestler named Kaz. And you're a little bit familiar with Kaz, correct?
His name is Frankie Kazarian. So he's in AEW and ROH right now currently, but he was always one of those people that they were, I think, similar to AJ Styles, similar to Samoa Joe. He just existed outside of the WWE bubble for so long. So I think a lot of people who were less familiar with anything happening, like me, anybody less familiar with things going on outside of the WWE, were like, Frankie Kazarian, this guy's incredible. Where'd he come from? Well, he was in places like TNA for a long time. He came up, just not in the WWE.
So this ladder match at Genesis is actually a rematch of a final round of the Fight for the Right tournament. So the Fight for the Right tournament actually started at Bound for Glory, and it's basically the winner gets the top contender for the title that Kurt has. So Kaz and Christian are going at it. And I want to talk about the first time that they clashed, because Christian enters the ring with a ladder, but that round wasn't a ladder match. So he comes in with a ladder and we're kind of sitting there like, why'd you bring that ladder in? And man, Kaz is such a good wrestler. He's very agile. He's really, really quick. It's just a really, really good match. As per usual, Tomko and AJ come out to distract Kaz. And while he's being distracted, Christian Cage brings out the ladder, and there's this really sick thing that happens where Kaz is busy with AJ. Christian brings out the ladder and it's partially on the ropes, and Kaz immediately uses the ladder to jump off of and hit Christian. And I just thought that ring awareness, really impressive and cool. Unfortunately, even though Kaz was being so fucking cool and just completely outnumbered, and there's now a ladder in the mix. Somehow Christian manages to just cream Kaz in the jaw with the ladder, and Christian Cage takes a win. But then Mr. Oil and Jeans himself, Matt Morgan, immediately runs out, and he's just like, "Oh no, Christian, you did not win this match. This is a no contest. How dare you? You're in for a rematch with Kaz at Genesis in a ladder match. You're a piece of shit. How dare you? I'm so shiny." At Genesis, this is a ladder match. Kaz wins the ladder match, but only because AJ and Tomko come out again and distract Christian, which really, Christian's really upset because he told them to not come out, and then they did. In the main event of Genesis, it's Kurt's defense of the TNA World Heavyweight Championship in a tag team match with Kevin Nash and Sting, and a mystery guest that they were teasing basically even on the day of, but it turns out to be Booker T, which is like a really pretty big deal. And Booker T was at WWE first, right? And then he came over to TNA.
Yeah, he was at WCW, then WWE, and then TNA.
So Booker T fucking rules. So
he incredible pickup by them.
You can tell that it was such a big deal because at every commercial break, they're like, "Oh, and then in a couple of episodes, Booker T is going to tell us why he came to TNA." So Booker T is a real tall guy, and his proportions are he's 9 feet of legs and then a little torso. Kevin Nash is 6'5", and Sting is a tall guy too. I think he's like 6'1". So it's just, this match is just a bunch of tall dudes just legging each other, which I think is like makes a really good match in my eyes. Just kicks and throws and suplexes. I just described wrestling. That's okay. So
it's everything I love. Just two people fighting to a pinfall victory.
Yeah, incredible. So eventually, Karen Angle, Kurt's wife, AJ, and Tomko come out as kind of a unit to distract the referee. And so while Karen's up on the ringside, AJ and Tomko come in and they start messing with Sting, and then Booker T's wife Sharmell comes down the ramp and engages Karen in a wives battle. There's hair pulling, pushing, screaming, and so the ref goes over and gets distracted enough that he doesn't see Kurt slam Kevin, his own tag team partner, with the championship title. So the ref is so distracted by the wives battle that Kurt, who could win right away, has to pull the ref back into the ring so that he could count out his pin on Sting. And so while Tomko and AJ are raising Kurt Angle's fists up in glory, we cut to Christian, who is bloody from his ladder match, and he is just so sad because he knows and we know that this is the beginning of the crumbling of Christian's coalition and the introduction of the Angle Alliance. So Michael, before we move on, I just want to know, have you ever been betrayed by your own cronies, or have you ever been in a position to have cronies, and would you like to have cronies?
I mean, Samee, have I ever been betrayed by my friends? Yeah. Feels bad.
Yeah.
I can relate to Christian. Have I ever been a crony? Hell no, I'm my own man. I do my own thing.
So you're the Tomko of this.
Yeah, I'm sort of a Tomko. I'm kind of a Tom. I've been told I give off Limp Bizkit bodyguard energy, so I've always been sort of a Tomko in my own right. But to answer your question, would I like to have cronies?
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely. I grew up watching Batman the animated series.
Yep.
And the thing I liked the most is all the bad guys had a bunch of goons and costumes. And I'll be honest, I always related to those guys way more than I related to Batman. So it's been a life's dream of mine to have a warehouse where I could just have a bunch of goons who all have to wear a little costume that I tell them to wear. And then they just like fight Batman or whoever. That sounds amazing to me. So on my bucket list, get some cronies. And I just want the record to show I don't consider you a crony. I consider you an equal.
I never would have classified myself as a crony for you, Michael.
I know. I just wanted to take that anxiety off of your plate, because
okay, I am very
because I know out of the two of us, I know I come across as like the more secure and you're the more anxious one. But I just wanted to say, Don't even feel anxious, dude. I would never consider you my crony.
Honestly, Michael, that really does ease my heart. And
Right.
I really appreciate that you took the time to do that. Thank you so
Yeah,
much.
could I also just say that in my head, I was like, I hope Sammy's not mad at me for joking about this, and I got for real anxious in the middle of talking. I was like, oh shit, I hope I didn't go too far. I hope Sammy's not mad at me.
So what is the Angle Alliance? The Angle Alliance is Kurt's faction, initially made up of Kurt, AJ Styles, Tomko, and Karen Angle. And AJ really wanted to be both in the Angle Alliance and Christian's coalition at the same time, but obviously that dream would not come true. Things immediately get spicy for what I'm calling AJ as both teams' styles, because in a vignette AJ is just like, oh, well, I want to be on both teams, and everyone's like, you want to be on both teams, AJ? And I thought that was really inappropriate but funny to me.
It is one of those mid 2000s jokes where you're just like, I shouldn't find this funny, but it is funny.
It is super funny. I'm allowed.
But also, I will say, just so rarely in wrestling do we get any kind of bisexual representation. I just think, honestly, pretty cool, AJ.
Yeah, AJ in TNA is our bisexual queen. Thank you, AJ.
Yeah, bisexual icon AJ Styles.
Clip it. Okay, so as I was saying, it gets a little bit complicated. It gets a lot of bit complicated for AJ Styles immediately.
What's a little bit frustrating to me, right, is AJ Styles is basically doing the classic taking 2 dates to prom situation, right? Where he's like,
Sure.
I pledged my allegiance to 2 factions and both the factions hate each other, but I could do both. And you're just like, AJ, don't you watch TV? That's never worked, and it's never gonna work.
Yeah, it feels very sitcom-y, especially when AJ is on screen. I don't know why.
Yeah, what we know about AJ is 2 things. 1, bisexual queen. 2, great at sitcom style acting.
Love him. I really wish he carried it over to WWE, and maybe I wouldn't feel so harshly about AJ if he was this bumbling sitcom child. AJ really wants to be both in the Angle Alliance and Christian's coalition, and he really actually wants both groups to be working together in harmony. But it gets really, really complicated immediately because the Angle Alliance plus Christian are up against Kaz, Abyss, Scott Steiner, and Samoa Joe. So again, the Angle Alliance is Kurt, it's AJ, it's Tomko plus Christian. So we're not even calling it Christian's coalition plus Kurt. At this moment, it is the Angle Alliance plus Christian. This match is coming up, and AJ is incredibly desperate to bring the groups together in harmony. And so the entire situation does feel very sitcom style. It actually feels like a sitcom style custody battle where AJ and Tomko are the children. Tomko is like the older sibling that's like 17 or whatever, and AJ is like, I don't know, like 10. And they're split between their parents, Kurt Angle and Christian Cage. So the two groups meet around a big conference table and agree to work together. So it's Christian, AJ, Tomko, Kurt Angle, and Karen Angle. They agree to work together, and AJ, who's so sweaty, just desperately trying to make everyone like each other and love each other because he loves both teams equally. He celebrates by writhing a little bit on the table, which, I don't love. Also, when everybody leaves the conference room, Christian Cage hangs back and kind of assaults Karen Angle, like in a very abusey, like scary, like holds
like
her
grabs
arms
the upper
way.
arm.
Yeah,
kinda.
and I really didn't love that, and I think that there's some more Karen stuff that happens with Christian, and it's enough for me to be like, as much of a fan as I became of Christian during the research, I really hated it. Really hated it. So as a reminder, AJ is trying so hard to make all of this good because they're in an 8-man tag team match, and spoiler alert, they lose. So AJ accidentally kicks Christian really, really hard, and Samoa Joe is able to finish the match after muscle busting Christian. And have you ever seen the Muscle Buster before, Michael?
Hell yes, I've seen the Muscle Buster. It rules. So basically what
Bro!
happens
Ugh.
is Samoa Joe like loads you up on his shoulders. So basically your head is resting on his shoulder, and then he just bunches you up into like a ball and then just falls backwards.
I could not believe it when I saw it, and I watched a compilation. I watched several compilations. This may be one of the most brutal non-weapon wrestling moves I've ever seen. So they lose the match, and at this point, Christian is alone. His two best friends, Tomko and AJ, are gone, and he goes to Robert Roode because he really does need a companion. And I think that this is kind of a Healy type thing to do, is to never be alone, because you always want somebody to like scapegoat or whatever.
It's kind of like all my exes are heels then.
You know what? They're exes, they are heels. You know what I mean?
Yeah, absolutely. Anyway, what were you going to say?
Do you know anything about Robert Roode?
Yeah, Robert Roode is another one of the sort of TNA originals. He'd been around since I think like 2004 or something. So
wow.
2 years after TNA starts, we get Robert Roode joining the mix, and I think his most well-known thing in TNA was I think it comes after this storyline. He's in a tag team called Beer Money, and basically their deal was they're about two things: drinking beer, making money.
I love that. I love that. So Robert Roode and his beer money are Christian's new best friend. And Kurt really does want to bring Christian into the fold. He reaches out. He's like, hey, dude, come be in the Angle Alliance. Like, if we smash our teams together, we can be one huge supergroup. And Robert Roode's just like, yeah, sure, no problem. But Christian's like, I don't need any of you. I am totally fine by myself. And he starts cutting a pretty savage promo. And he says, Kurt, you've got beady little eyes. And I know that you're playing it safe because if I'm on your team, I'm not going to challenge you. So you just want me on your team. You need me on your team for your safety. And he's not having it. So he's kind of going down the line and just cutting down everybody. And he gets to Tomko, and he's just like, don't look at me! Don't you dare look at me!
And then Tomko looks away.
And he goes, look at me when I'm talking to you. It's like, dude, come on, man. Like,
I know, that's just some classic comedy shit of like, don't you dare look at me. Hey, look me in the eyes. You're like, okay, man, right? I can't win with you. Give me a break.
Yeah, it's so funny. I really love it. And Christian moves on to AJ, and it's at this point where Christian reveals, or did he ever feel this way about AJ? Who knows? But he reveals to AJ how much he's meant to him. He's just like, I saw so much potential in you. I really believed in you. And you said that you look at me like a dad. And you know what? If I was your dad, I would disown you. And that really, it looks like AJ was stabbed in the heart. But then after all of that, Christian's like, okay, I'll be a part of the Angle Alliance, but only if I'm the leader of this group.
I gotta say, bold strategy. That's a bold negotiating technique to be like, every single one of you is a piece of shit, but I will join you if I can be the leader. And everyone's like, right. Excuse me?
Yeah, it's like, what are you doing, Christian? Like, he must be so lost he must have been feeling so lost without his coalition that he's just imploding. Like, up until now, you can kind of see he's a very calculated, planned guy. He's like, I have an exit strategy for every single type of thing, but I think right now he's so overwhelmed with emotions that he's gonna pop off and tell people about their small eyes and then agree to be on their team. Like, all right, cool, no problem.
Yeah, but it does sort of feel like, and I do think that, again, we're getting into character psychology here, but it does feel like there's an element of self-sabotage in here, which is why he's a heel, right? Where it's like, he can't get over his own pride. So he's like, let me ask for something that's impossible. You know what I mean? To be like, let me just insult everybody and then ask for the one thing they probably can't do, to be like, I hate every single one of you. Every single one of you is a piece of garbage. but I will join if I could be the leader of the Angle Alliance.
Right. Right. I won't change the name. I will keep it the Angle Alliance, but I have to be team captain. He reaches his hand out, and in a shock to everybody, Kurt agrees, and they shake hands, and the image of Kurt Angle and Christian Cage in 2007 shaking hands is really truly a snapshot of how bad fashion was back then. Somehow they're both dressed so differently, but they're also both in pinstripes. Kurt Angle. You know what I mean? Like Kurt Angle is in this mob boss like pinstripe suit, and Christian is in that very, very 2007 billowy black pinstripe button up where you see it and you for sure know that somewhere on it is an embroidered like cross or eagle. You know what I'm talking about?
Absolutely, I do.
So these two dumb idiots are shaking hands, and later on in that episode, everything crumbles. So Christian is in the middle of the ring and he's trying to assert his dominance as the leader of the Angle Alliance, and Kurt he just snaps immediately. He hits Christian with the belt and it devolves into this chaos where Kurt is going at Christian. Tomko doesn't know what to do, so he leaves.
What's so funny is, so Tomko's like, I've had it, and he walks away.
Yeah.
And then it devolves into straight up a silent comedy routine where both Kurt Angle and Robert Roode are beating the crap out of Christian. And then AJ, he'll pull Kurt Angle away and be like, hey man, chill. And while he's doing that, Robert Roode's just behind him beating the crap out of Christian. He turns around, he's like, and then he goes to try to stop, like, whoa, Robert, come on, man. Like, he used to be Christian Coalition, right? And then while he's doing that behind him, Kurt Angle's like, oh crap, I'm just gonna beat the crap out of I'm gonna beat the crap out of Christian some more. And so he's just bouncing between these two guys, being like, please stop. And then Tom goes like, I'm out of here. And then that's how the episode ends.
It's pretty wild. So now it's Turning Point, December 2nd, 2007. So Turning Point isn't huge for Christian or Kurt at all, but it does live in infamy because this is the episode where Scott Hall does not show up for work, and Samoa Joe is so pissed. And I think like Samoa Joe is the favorite of TNA, it feels like. It sounds like. The crowd's reaction to him whenever anything is happening, whether he's wrestling or not, everybody's like, Joe, Joe, Joe. So I feel like Samoa Joe is the face of the company, and if I'm wrong, don't correct me. In order to kind of try to save the night, the producers of the show give Samoa Joe the microphone, and they're like, hey dude, like just say something on the mic real quick. And Samoa Joe is so mad that he's gonna go on a rant. We know he's gonna go on a rant, and we know that it's really truly for real rant because immediately the mic starts peaking. And I'm not gonna break down the speech word for word, but he's basically like, there are two types of wrestlers at TNA, people who work and people who are old and don't work and are useless and awful. Scott Hall didn't show up, but Kevin Nash did. And Samoa Joe is cutting this promo, cutting down both Scott Hall and Kevin Nash, but they're supposed to be on the same team after Samoa Joe cuts this rant. And you can see Kevin Nash in the background just getting more and more sheepish while Samoa Joe's like, TNA is full of heart and you old dudes fucking suck. And there's a little bit of a feeling that he was also addressing Kurt Angle, but this whole entire rant is so powerful and so cool. Like, I know for a fact that I'm probably going to watch it before any time I do anything that I'm a little bit scared about.
And I think this gets into, because I believe the reason why Scott Hall no-showed the event is there were some substance issues that he was dealing with at the time. And so that was a real tough situation around. And I'm going to try to talk about this delicately because there was a reputation around TNA where it was like a lot of guys in TNA came to TNA because they were struggling with some substance abuse and behavioral issues. And so this is not the only time something like this happened. Yeah, again, even Kurt Angle at this time was absolutely abusing substances and stuff like that. And so it's really sad. It's really unfortunate. And I think I want to give that context to, there's a reason why Scott Hall no-showed the event. It's not necessarily good, and it is serious, but at the same time, like, I think it does. I don't think it diminishes Samoa Joe's real anger in the situation. And then management behind the scenes trusted Joe to be like, hey, we kind of are in a huge bind because we promised a big star like Scott Hall to show up, and we need the fans to be happy. So we're going to let Samoa Joe just speak his mind. That was another thing that TNA was also pretty known for, was doing the work shoot angle. So a work is that it's scripted, a shoot is that it's real. And so you blur the lines with a work shoot. And so I think there was a handful of people who were coming to TNA because they had substance abuse issues and they could kind of get away with that behavior. And then there was also the work shoot element where they're like, oh, we're going to take a real controversy and we're going to turn it into a storyline. And so it kind of was the perfect confluence of events to happen at Turning Point 2007, I think.
I see. Let's get back to it. On an episode of Impact, it's becoming clear that AJ and Tomko need to pick a side, and they're getting pressure from each other and other wrestlers and announcers. And I think it really is kind of cute that Tomko stuck with AJ for as long as he did, because he really didn't need to. They're not bound by anything except cutie little loyalty. But he did eventually make a huge statement that he is Team Tomko and everybody can eat crow.
The Limp Bizkit tendencies are coming back out, where he was just like,
I did it all for the Tomko.
Yeah, he did it all for the Tomko.
So we cut to Christian. He's in the ring and he's cutting a promo, and I never in my entire life thought that I would ever hear a wrestler quoting Shakespeare in a promo, but that's exactly what we got. And he's calling out for AJ now, and he's like, AJ, come out here, dude. And AJ comes trotting in, and Christian starts claiming that his entire career is due to Christian. And there is like there's a funny moment in there where AJ corrects Christian. So Christian's like, you've had the championship title 2 times. And AJ's like, oh, actually it was 3. And Christian's says, yeah, you've had 3. And one of those was before my time, but I'll take credit for that anyway. So I feel like Christian had it all figured out, but AJ just wasn't up to date on what was happening. And so he corrected him, and then Christian had to course correct. Anyways, it was real fun. And Kurt eventually comes out, and Christian and Kurt start physically fighting over AJ. And I know that the entire situation has made AJ in his Stockholm syndrome, like, haze very, very stressed out. But I really do hope that he had a moment to kind of pause and slow down and really treasure being the TNA's belle of the ball. Have you ever been fought over physically?
I have, and it ended with me getting yelled at by 3 people. So I don't recommend it.
Okay, wow.
If you're going to be the belle of the ball, just make sure you've got very clear communication. Clearer than I thought I did. But
And people really wanted clear communication from AJ. They followed him. Camera crews followed him to his grandmother's house. And they're like, AJ, we need an answer. Which team are you on? And AJ's flustered, and he kind of sends us on a roller coaster of, oh, I'm on Team Christian. Oh, wait, I'm on Team Angle. And he gets so confused that he says that he's on Team Angle with some finality. And we're like, oh, fuck, he chose Kurt. But then he corrects it, and he's like, you know what? Actually, you'll know my answer at Final Resolutions. So January 6th, 2008 is Final Resolution. It looks like Christian Cage is finally going to beat Kurt in the main event, and he's using Kurt's own ankle lock on his ankle. but fucking Karen Angle pops up out of nowhere, and she distracts the ref, and AJ shows up, and we're all like suspended in this moment of, oh, fuck. Like, this is the moment. This is where we're going to find that AJ's going to choose Christian. In my heart, I was really feeling Christian because that's where he was for most of this storyline.
And let's just be real, like Christian, he's the toxic ex. Doesn't it feel good to get back with him? You know what I mean? Like, doesn't it just feel right,
Yeah.
even though it's so wrong?
Yeah, and up until this point, when Christian or when Kurt talks to AJ, it seems like healthy ish. Like he's like, "Oh yeah, come on, we're a team, buddy. We're a family." He's just
He's
feeding
stable,
AJ
he's
what he
reliable,
wants.
and Christian is toxic and unpredictable. And doesn't that
And
just
that's
seem
what
more fun to get back with him?
Yeah, sure, Michael. I purely wanted AJ to go back to Christian. They hug. They have this beautiful moment. Christian turns around and AJ flies off the ropes, hitting Christian, and Kurt takes the win.
AJ's
Heartbreaking.
AJ's Angle Alliance.
At Final Resolution, AJ finally says it. He is Angle Alliance. We go to Against All Odds, which was on February 10th, 2008. It's Kurt Angle versus Christian Cage with special enforcer Samoa fucking Joe. Our guy, our dude. And I'm so hype on Samoa Joe after all of this research and stuff. He special enforced in a way that felt so good. So during this match, which the official wrestling stopwatch is 20 minutes and 40 seconds. So Christian, as I mentioned before, I think he wrestles really beautifully. Christian, I think, is wrestling a pretty clean game. And Kurt is the one trying to throw Christian out of the ring and hit him with the chair. And Samoa Joe is just the cleanest special enforcer. So it kind of almost feels like there's like an understanding between Christian and Samoa during this fight. Like Christian is taking this match really, really seriously. He is all alone. It is proven that he has nothing left. His last actual friend, AJ, is gone. He just wants to win. He wants to win that gold. He wants to get his buddies back. And Samoa Joe is a no nonsense guy, and it's just like feels like they're working together even though they're not working together. So Kurt's trying to bring in this chair from the outside, and it's not just a regular chair. For some reason, he's picked up this tan chair with a cushion on it and an armrest, and I don't know why I'm fixated on this chair specifically or why Kurt did, but it looks like it would hurt a million times more than a black regular folding chair, so maybe that's why. But Samoa Joe foils Kurt like a couple of times during this match, and eventually the wheels fall off of the cart and AJ comes running, sprinting into the arena, and Samoa Joe doesn't want anything of it, and he doesn't want this match to be messed up by AJ. So Samoa Joe, unfortunately, leaves the side of the ring to chase AJ all the way through the stadium. And now Kurt is able to be devious, and he starts smashing Christian with that chair. Karen Angle comes up, and she ends up in the damn ring. The ref gets knocked out, and Tomko comes into the ring. In the episode of Impact before this match, Tomko was wrestling Kurt Angle with special referee AJ, and Christian, in kind of an attempt to get his boys back, hit Kurt Angle with the title belt while AJ was out of the ring, and that helped Tomko win the match. And so when Tomko shows up, there's a vibe, there's an expectation that Tomko is going to return the favor and help Christian out. But my goodness, it doesn't. He doesn't at all. Like, Christian is exhausted by this point of the match because he's been wrestling clean the whole time for 20 minutes straight.
I know, it's his first time just giving it his best shot in like 2 years.
Seriously. And he's like Christian's limp, and when Tomko takes him up on his shoulders, it's kind of like he's just carrying a dead body, and it really hurt to see when Tomko slammed him on the ground and Kurt took the win.
So Against All Odds, this is a full year since the last time. So this whole storyline kicked off with Christian fighting Kurt Angle at Against All Odds in 2007, where Christian was rolling in, right? He had the coalition, he had Tomko, he had AJ, everybody helping him cheat, and Kurt Angle could just not overcome the odds. And here we are a year later, and we're in the exact opposite situation. He's not only taken the title, he's taken his alliance from him and is now beating Christian with the same like outside interference that he had a full year ago. So this is just like Christian was highest of highs, and we now plummet to the lowest of lows.
I think Tomko smashing Christian into the mat in order for Kurt to win was like, that was truly just the most betrayals that Christian could ever see. And the coalition is fully and completely over.
And so I guess just as an epilogue to the story, so February 10th, 2009, so a little about a year after this takes place, Christian heads back over to the WWE where he joins their newly rebranded ECW. So like we said, the Monday Night Wars, it was WWF versus WCW. Then there was the third company, ECW. And in 2001, WWE bought all of those. And so all of those people are now under the umbrella. So WWE relaunched ECW. And so they brought Christian back to kind of pilot the ECW brand. And I think Christian went on to improve his standing a little bit in the eyes of people outside of the WWE. Like, I think he proved that he had more to offer. And so while he didn't get as big of a shot as he got in TNA, he definitely got more of a shot than he would have gotten had he never left at all. And AJ Styles and Tomko, they hung on to their tag team titles until April 17th, 2008. Once they lost those titles, the resentment between the two started to build, and culminating in, I think, Tomko getting increasingly like jealous and territorial, and it culminated in AJ Styles sort of snapping and quitting the Angle Alliance and his partnership with Tomko. He would go on to win the TNA Heavyweight Championship, so I think he was right to get out from under the coalition and the alliance's shadow, because in a lot of ways it was holding him back. So he took a run, got the TNA title, and then in 2014, AJ Styles left TNA to join New Japan Pro Wrestling, where he would get a very intriguing opportunity to lead a faction called the Bullet Club. But Samee, that's a story for a different day.
Ah, shucks.
So that was Christian Cage, the Christian Coalition, the history of TNA wrestling. Samee, what stood out to you from this episode?
I think what really stood out to me is this all happened because Christian believed himself a lot more than WWE believed in him. And I don't know, I really respect that, and I love that for him.
And I think for me, the thing that stood out is when I was a young wrestling fan, I pretty much my bias was the WWE. I didn't really know anything beyond WWE. And I would always hear from people that TNA was just a huge joke and it wasn't worth anybody's time and it was really, really bad. Then all of a sudden in the mid, like 2015, all these amazing wrestlers started popping up, and I was like, wait, AJ Styles is really great. Samoa Joe is awesome. Robert Roode is incredible. All these people are so great. And then just to be like, wait, you're telling me Kurt Angle had a whole other second half of his career? Christian Cage had this amazing run. Like, all these people were doing all this Abyss. I had never seen him before, all this stuff. So for me, I think the criticisms about TNA are absolutely there. I totally understand what they're saying. There was a lot of stuff presentation wise, storytelling wise, that just felt a little too much. It was just sort of the worst instincts of Attitude Era twists and turns storytelling that I didn't always love. I didn't necessarily love the six-sided ring, but what I was really blown away by was just the incredible talent that was on display by the wrestlers. And I think so often we get really, people talk about tribalism in wrestling fandom all the time. And I do think that it benefits no one. You know what I mean? Like, I don't know who you think you're supporting by doing it. And you're just missing out on incredible wrestlers and incredible matches just because the presentation looks a little bit different than you're used to. So I think I was just so grateful that we get to continue to do this podcast together, because it gave me an excuse to force myself to watch something that I wouldn't have necessarily given the time of day. And I'm so glad that I did, because I learned a lot more and got to fill in a lot of new and extra dimensions of some of my favorite wrestlers. And it gave me a newfound appreciation for a bunch of wrestlers that I already liked. I think the other thing that I realized is there's a lot of stuff about the WWE that I like, but the main thing, and especially in the time period we were talking about, is WWE would like box you in, right? And so if you wanted to find yourself or succeed or find a new dimension of your character, you would really have to strike out and try to make a name for yourself. And I mean, I think a really recent example, right, is Cody Rhodes. He was in the WWE and he really didn't enjoy what they were doing. They only saw him at this level. So then he left, had a whole career. We're going to do a Cody Rhodes episode, don't get me wrong. Then he went to AEW, right? Then he kind of got to a ceiling there, came back to WWE, and now he's like one of the biggest baby faces ever, ever, ever. And had he not bet on himself, he would have never been able to do it, right? Some people are able to power through and get to the top. And for other people, they really have to take a pretty serious gamble. And people like Christian Cage, they only saw him at this level. He struck out. He proved that he could carry a company. And then when he came back to WWE, they still didn't really trust him. He still didn't get to the same heights. And then he went over to AEW, and now he's reinvented himself again in his 50s as a different, complicated bad guy that was going viral all the time for just having incredible burns and put downs on the microphone, right? So my point is, like, sometimes things aren't the right fit for you, and it's always incredible to see somebody bet on themselves and be right. And I think that's exactly what Christian Cage proved. Like we said, he's great on the mic, he's great in the ring. This guy's money, and WWE didn't see it the 2 times they had him, and I think that's a bummer. But incredible that he was able to like branch out and give us exactly what we knew he was capable. He just had to do it elsewhere.
Well, thank you for betting on and listening to Wrestling Academy, hosted, produced, edited by Michael Classic and Samee Junio. Follow us on Instagram, TikTok, and YouTube at Wrestling Academy Pod, or send us an email at wrestlingacademypod@gmail.com.
And follow and rate and leave a positive review wherever you get your podcasts. But be sure to check us out on Spotify, where we have Q&As and polls for every single episode. And I think what I want to know this time is, I mean, I think it's kind of a no-brainer. It's like, who is your favorite wrestler in TNA? Because now that we're here and we're checking it out, it made me really want to dig deeper and find more TNA wrestlers. And I think that would be very, very cool. So if you have any suggestion on that, let us know on Spotify, or you can visit our website, wrestlingacademy.university. Yes, that is our real website. We paid a lot of money to it. We paid a lot of money for it because, as you saw from the Sandman, we commit to the bit.
We do.
Class is dismissed.
Class is dismissed.